Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for this video, I just want to give my overall thoughts on my experience with one of my favorite fantasy series of all time, the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. The Stormlight Archive is my second favorite epic fantasy series of all time, just behind A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. And just a little context for how I got into the series. Basically, I had finished the 5 books in A Song of Ice and Fire way back in like 2015, and that was like the very first adult fantasy series I had ever read. So I pretty much started out with a bang, right? But then after that, after A Dance with Dragons, book 5, I was like, I need something else now. I needed to scratch my epic fantasy itch. So I went to Barnes & Noble and basically went looking for what I thought would be my next potential favorite fantasy series. And what I saw was The Way of Kings. And this is what I saw, actually. I saw how thick it was, and I turned to the back page and I was like, oh wow, 1,200 pages, good lord. So I went into this book not knowing anything about the Cosmere, not knowing anything about who the hell Brandon Sanderson was. I just jumped right into it and just fell in love with the world and the characters and what little plot there actually is in this book. And now that I've finished the entire, well, not the entire, but like what we have now, the first 4 books, a lot of people are saying that Rhythm of War is now their all-time favorite Stormlight book. And for me, I can't put it up there yet. My favorite is still The Way of Kings. And that might just be like my sentimentality talking to me, but you know, this is one of the very first true epic fantasy books I've ever read. I've read this book twice now. It's my second favorite book of all time. So it's really going to be hard for any Stormlight book to top that. As far as how I would rank this series, I think it's pretty typical. I think for sure, number 1, Way of Kings. That's number 1. And then at the bottom, I think, like most people, I'd put Oathbringer. Oathbringer, I mean, obviously it's not bad. All of these books are 5-star reads. And it does have a great ending with Dalinar and his whole scene with Odium. I think Oathbringer is definitely the least character-driven book. Whereas like Way of Kings, that's almost like all character development. Rhythm of War, you definitely get a lot of very emotional and just depressing character development. And then Words of Radiance, I feel like, has a really good balance between plot and character development. And I think that's why a lot of people would choose it over Way of Kings. Because Way of Kings, it's really hard to describe what happens in that book because there's just so little actual plot happening. But in Oathbringer, it just feels like it's all like, go, go, go. We need to do this. We need to do that. And he doesn't take as much time to develop the characters. And the real character development for Dalinar mostly happens with flashbacks. We get flashbacks to his past and, you know, the Blackthorn days, right, where just he was ruthless. And I do really love those Dalinar flashbacks, but in most cases it's more satisfying to have character development that happens in the present, which is definitely something that you can say about Rhythm of War. I mean, Kaladin just goes through the friggin' ringer in this book, man. Oh my god. yeah, I would put Way of Kings as 1, Oathbringer as 4, but I really have a hard time deciding, you know, Words of Radiance or Rhythm of War. Which one's better? I mean, at that point, I'm just splitting hairs because, you know what? I'd probably just go with Words of Radiance because, you know, at this point, I've read it twice. I reread the book. I reread the whole series before I read Rhythm of War for the first time. So I don't know, I just feel more comfortable with that book. This book is just so fresh. As I was saying, this book is so fresh in my mind that I feel like I have to sit with it for a little bit. It was just an emotional gut punch for a lot of the book, especially when it came to the Kaladin chapters, and especially when, and I'll get into a spoiler here, but when Teft died and Kaladin, you know, jumps and he starts seeing his little brother, and his little brother was, you know, talking to him and trying to reassure him. Kaladin was basically just saying, like, you know, I'm not strong enough, and Ian's just like, you're strong enough for me. And just that whole scene, I'm not really a very emotional reader. Like, I don't cry a lot during books, but that scene kind of, you know, had a little teary-eye there. I also feel like Shallan's chapters were so good in this book, and that might be like the tipping point for me putting Rhythm of War above Words of Radiance. Her chapters and what she's struggling with her dissociative identity disorder, and she's just going back and forth through all these personas, and then all of the reveals that we get with her. Yeah. But then there's also, like, the flashback chapters. The first 3 books just all have terrific flashback chapters. The first book, you got Kaladin and his backstory, phenomenal. You got Shallan, which hers were a little bit more sparse, but they were also very intriguing. You're trying to figure out, like, what exactly happened that made her this way. And then Dalinar's, which is so gripping and unique because it's almost night and day where he was in the past to where he is now. But with these flashback chapters, they're very few, they're very short, and I don't know. And it's weird because I just read this book, but I don't really remember too much about the flashbacks. I will say this book has the weakest flashback chapters. And it's not that I don't like Vinley as a character. I just wish they would have been a little more intriguing. And you know what might be another tipping point for me is that Yasna is my favorite Stormlight character, which is a huge reason why I love Way of Kings so much. And she's in this book. She doesn't have a whole lot of chapters, but when she is in the book, she does a lot of badass stuff and has really cool scenes. Whereas in Words of Radiance, you know, if you've read the book, obviously, you know that she's not in the majority of the book because she's presumed dead. And that's a huge reason why I like Words of Radiance less than Way of Kings, is because she's hardly in that book. But in Rhythm of War, she, you know, like I said, she doesn't have a whole ton of screen time, but when she is there, she's doing and saying interesting things that I like. I still haven't really come across anyone saying that Oathbringer is their favorite. I don't see it. Like, even when Oathbringer came out, everyone just kind of agreed that, yeah, the first 2 books are better. Like, whether you like Way of Kings or Words of Radiance more, like, chances are you like them more than Oathbringer. I've never seen anyone say, like, oh yeah, ranking order. Oh, I'd go Oathbringer, Words of Radiance, Way of Kings, like, it's almost always at the bottom. I will say that one thing that Words of Radiance has that Rhythm of War kind of lacks in is great pacing. Especially, I would just say the first two books in general are the best paced books. And then Oathbringer, I would probably say that's why a lot of people don't like the book. It's just the pacing isn't as great. And then Rhythm of War, I feel like the pacing is just kind of all over the place. You either get like really cool action stuff and you get really like deep, depressing, emotional stuff, and then some of the time just stuff happens. Rhythm of War is definitely a book that like starts out great and then ends really great, but the middle chunk of the book, some of those chapters either go on too long or they don't feel 100% necessary to the story, which is always something that really irks me with any kind of long book. Even though Way of Kings and Words of Radiance, they're definitely long books, they are shorter than Rhythm of War and Oathbringer, and all of the scenes do feel necessary, either to the world building, the character development, or the plot. I do think Rhythm of War is unique in its ending, because in the first three books, they all kind of end on hopeful terms, where something really bad happens or something potentially bad is going to happen, but then one of our characters does something amazing and kind of like triumphs over it. But in this book, like there is triumph, but then there's like, the last, I don't know, 50, 60 pages where stuff starts happening and kind of gloomy and kind of just uncertain, and it ends with, a fight that's going to happen in 10 days, which obviously the last book, that's what the book is going to be. It's going to take place in 10 days, which I don't know how Sanderson's going to do that, but I obviously trust him. But like I said, the series as a whole is just amazing. It's my second favorite series of all time. All 4 books are easily 5-star reads for me. And to put them, in any kind of order at this point, you're just splitting hairs. Although I will say Way of Kings is just a standout book for me. Whereas the rest of the books are just slightly less good or less great. I'll also point out that Rhythm of War might be the most confusing book for me. Sometimes I would read a chapter and I'd be a little confused as to actually what happened, and I'd have to like go back and like reread it and say like, oh, okay, this is what happened. Or even the stuff with Navani and however you pronounce that fused names, Raboniel, I think. Like all of the different kind of science stuff that they're discovering and that they're doing and experimenting on. A lot of that stuff went right over my head, and I had to like look up online like what exactly are they doing here. But I probably felt that way the first time I read Way of Kings. I'm sure, like there was some stuff that went over my head and I thought was confusing. I've now read it twice, and it's hard for me to remember exactly how I felt when I read it because it was 6 years ago. But since I've read the first 3 books twice now, they're all pretty much coherent for me. I think if I go back and reread this book sometime in the future, I'll understand more and I'll be able to catch more stuff. And now that I've read all of the Cosmere novels, I have not read like the White Sand graphic novels. I'm not very much interested in those. But now that I've read all of the Cosmere novels, I definitely want to make a ranking video where I rank all of the Cosmere novels. I actually made a video I think like 4 years ago, where I ranked all of the Cosmere books. It's really bad. Like there's no, you can't even hear me in the video, but hopefully I can make an updated, better version. Anyway, if you've made it this far through the video, please let me know what you guys think of the Stormlight Archive series as a whole. How would you rank the books? What's your favorite? What's your least favorite? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.